tell you a story that happens time after time after time.
And the world was silent. No one said a thing. No one cared. No one interfered, and the world was silent. No one said a thing. No one
Let me tell you a story. It's not a good night story with a happy end. Let me tell you a story, and maybe you'll care enough to make amends.
And the world was quiet. No one made a sound of the people's problems. No one said else, and the world was quiet.
Not far from here, people are being slaughtered. People are dying. Not far from here, there is no hope for humankind.
And the world is silent. No one says a thing. No one cares.
In memory of over 500,000 nameless victims of Assad's atrocities, and in recognition of the silent and brave volunteers of the Israeli Flying Aid who risked their lives while operating in the field.
So we're Israeli Flying Aid, and the clip you just saw was made for a crowdfunding campaign in Israel for the women and children in Syria during the Syrian conflict. I think it shows the mosaic of Israel because a donation to produce this film was made by a Holocaust survivor. The lady who wrote the lyrics for the song is an Orthodox mother. The song was performed and sang by an Arab Israeli singer and produced by a dear friend of our organization, an Israeli woman. And I think it shows our slogan very well. It's our never again. Nobody asks permission to kill. We don't ask permission to save lives. So Israeli Flying Aid was established in response to the injustice in Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations and the Rome Statute. They define actions with respect to threats to peace and acts of aggression. And according to these charters, all aid must be delivered via the official local authorities of a country, and prevention of aid is not considered a crime. And due to this injustice, managed disasters turn into mass killing weapons. So what do? We're an Israeli organization, women-led. We deliver life-saving aid to communities struck by disasters and human conflict worldwide. And our focus is on countries that lack diplomatic relations with Israel and places where local regimes do not allow the entry of international aid. So basically, when in friendly countries to Israel, we have our government that can provide aid. In hostile and enemy countries, we're there to compensate for that gap. And we feel it's our moral obligation to do so. We're a non-profit, non-governmental organization. We have 1,200 volunteers, professional volunteers, registered. All Israeli, Jewish, Druze, Arab Israeli, Christians from the whole range. In terms of our work, we have 3 ways of appearance. And this is in order, first of all, for us to be safe in the places we work in, and also to keep the recipient side safe and have them be able to receive our aid without any concerns or risks. So in friendly countries where we work together with IDF, like Haiti or Nepal, we go with our logo, as you see me here, the Star of David, Israeli flag aid. In hostile countries, we have a European undercover story, and in enemy countries, it's full undercover. So we know how to be transparent and not embarrass any of the sides. Our expertise focus in mass feeding centers, search and rescue teams, emergency medical aid, and trauma and emotional relief. So you can see here a list of our missions: following the tsunami, Sri Lanka, earthquake, Pakistan, Kashmir, Indonesia, Burma, Syria for 7.5 years. Gal will go into detail about that. Chad, Lebanon, Sudan, and more. So just to give you a little bit about our volunteers, which is really the heart of our organizations. Here in this picture, following the conflict between Georgia and Russia, you can see Ol is a sniper in the army, and he was a student during this time, and he took 2 weeks off to volunteer and help together with us. Lisa is here. She was the mother of twins that were 5 years old. She's an ICU pediatric nurse at Schneider, which is one of the biggest medical centers in Israel. We have medical plans that work with us, and this is especially important in order to work with girls that were raped and children, because then it doesn't require a translator to be in the picture, and there's no embarrassment for the victims. Here you can see also the work at a girls' orphanage in Haiti with the medical clowns, working on post-trauma treatment together. In terms of the feeding centers, so we have 2 kinds of methods. So in places that we feel safe and we can stay put, we have mass feeding centers that can reach up to 150,000 meals a day. It's 3 shifts of about 130 people working, and we distribute the meals in the areas around. In places that are more problematic and we feel that we can't keep our team safe, and we drive on a route with aid convoys, and change the routes according to the information we receive, and then provide the aid by distributing it, usually from trucks. This picture shows, Georgia, Russia, it's a friendly country to Israel. It's an example for when we can work with our logo out there. And regardless of the fact that we actually invaded a territory that was under the control of the Russians and provided aid to the people there, but we were still with our identity out there. This is a dining room at an orphanage in Indonesia. So during disaster, we collect the children from the area, and they can stay with us. They have free meals. They have post-trauma treatment from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And they can stay safe and away from all of the horrible sights. And this picture, you see Gal, it's in Kashmir. And it comes to show that we always collaborate with locals that we get to know and that we build trust with. We find the people that both know the field and understand it, and also have the compassion and the will to save lives. This is on a way to the mosque in Kashmir to ask for the help in removing snow from the roads in order to allow the approach of trucks to isolated villages. So this was just to give you a brief overview of the different things that we do. And now I'm happy to allow Val, the founder and CEO of Israeli Flying Aid, to go into more detail about our work in Syria for 7.5 years. So thank you.
So good afternoon. First of all, thank you for coming. I'm a worse speaker, I can promise you that. I hope I'm not that doer. And for us at the HUD, it's the first exposure we ever chose to do. And it's more than symbolic choosing Dubai for this event. ALEPO was established in 2005 in order to deliver life-saving aid to communities that were not accessible to official Israeli aid. And Maya explained exactly why we are doing so, while working below the radar and trying to maintain safe, but at the same time to create a big impact on local people's lives. So that was a campaign that was launched. We're going to drill into the Syrian issue with you, and just remember, we still need to stay safe. So Silent Kills was a campaign you saw before, and this is a Photoshop work on a beautiful girl, Syrian refugee that crossed into Jordan. ALEPO was active into Syria with cross-border missions from 3 different borders. The Jordanian border, the Israeli border, of course, later on, and the Turkish border. And, we feel that, the motivation of life-saving aid and the dedication of our NGOs and volunteers is very specific. The only loyal cause we demonstrate loyalty 24/7 is the victims' needs. Not to anybody else, not to our authorities or government, not to the donors, and not to any government within the disaster occurrence. The victims are the target population, and we really make an effort to stay focused. We do not care what they think about us. We do not care about changing the perception about our homeland in their eyes or anything else. So you can see loyalty that changes in Syria. We began this war we had just two big forces, regime side and opposition side. Within no time, there were more than 1,500 different fractures we had to deal with and found our way. And remember, move big cargos and stay safe. You can see the same person was trained and equipped by the US Army for months, poured in millions of dollars, and then switched sides. So I'll just say a word about the refugee issue. You know, Europe was flooded with refugees that began to move from April 2015, started to pour out. And Europe didn't understand why. Why did the Syrians all of a sudden decided to move out from Syria? So they were hoping 2011 for a change within Syria. They were really willing to go back home to their homeland, to their homes, to their agricultural lands, or any other thing they did back home. The issue was that an agreement was drafted, a nuclear agreement with Iran, you all remember. But nobody thought about the Syrian angle. We back home in Israel were terrified due to the circumstances it can cause for Israel. But none of us thought about the Syrian mothers that are waiting next door in a neighboring country, in Jordan or in Turkey, of course, and willing to go back home immediately when Assad regime changes or falls. But removal of sanctions due to that new nuclear agreement with Europe and with the Western world just closed down on that dream to go back home. Because what those mothers understood, Assad will never fall, will never go. Iran is going to pour removal of sanctions, will pour billions of dollars back to Iran, Iran to Syria, to the regime, and then that's it. Assad is stabilized and secure forever. And they were losing hope to recover their old homes. And they started desperately moving via the sea and via the land. Bulgaria, Greece, you know, crossing by land to the heart of Europe. So just mentioning that, and not from the Israeli perspective, we feel we are emotionally resilient to that. We have a state, we have a country to fight for us. But none of those fights for Syria and for the Syrian children and women that need to wander around the world and look for a safe shelter. And you can see the draft agreement, you can see the months and the numbers who moved into Europe following this agreement. A bit about the volunteers. So as Maya mentioned, we have Druze, Christians, Muslims, and Jews working, you know, under the same values representing the pulsating heart of the Israeli civil society. And you can say the second from the right is Joe. He was fighting for an elite unit, an undercover elite unit. He's Muslim, he's the father of beautiful 6 girls. And he gives everything exactly as we do, no time. This is in Jordan, prior to changing our clothes and you know, going below the radar in order to stay safe crossing into Syria. And that's how shelter looks like in Syria. It's nothing of what we even can imagine. You know, we tried at our booths to give a little bit of the atmosphere, but it's nothing even getting close to that. No access to clean water, no sanitary kits or help, no food access. And bear in mind, the whole 2.5 years in Jordan, the refugees wasn't even recognized as refugees because His Royal Highness hid the fact that there were Syrian refugees on his land, because he still did not know. He was moving and shaking in his seat, embarrassed from Assad government or regime. So the refugees had to find their own ways and sources. They did not get a refugee status that allowed them access to medical help and food security at that time. Only 2 years later, that has changed. This is our activities, and you can see beautiful Syrian babies. By the way, the Syrian women are amazing. Nothing to compare with what we see in Jordan or in Egypt. Even if they live in the rural areas, they're independent, they drive. The ones in the cities are learning, going to university, super bright, fully independent, having their own bank accounts and their own career, handling the house and an external career. And you can see here, our team members, our volunteers sometimes need to change the women
in the delegation needs to change their outfit a few times a day, because every time you change the tribal area, a different tribal area, you need to adjust and to dress up as a local. So the men can continue with the same dressing, but the women at the delegation needs to change rather often. And you see medical clowns, and this is a group who work with an Israeli NGO. We're proud to share knowledge with and take their volunteers. They are doing medical clowning. But why do we use medical clowns? So we have two main reasons. First of all, distribution points of medical help or any other, groceries, food, whatever, are very, very edgy. People wait for hours in line, and sometimes when you get to the last truck, they say, hey, we were standing here for hours and we're not even sure we're gonna have enough. So people start being aggressive. Not to the fact that we're born this way, due to the fact they are despairing. That's the only way to give their children food. And there's a lot of access to ammunition and to weapons. Like a Kalashnikov in Syria costs $120. Come on, everybody has it. The husband goes to fight, he leaves one to his wife, although she was never trained, she doesn't know even how to hold her, because he's worried she's going to be raped or the family is going to be hurt. And she comes with that Kalashnikov to the distribution and stands in line. So when things become very edgy and nervous, and she feels threatened, she might abuse it. And when there's shootings, there are militias who come in with no time, and then it becomes dangerous for us as a distribution team. What the medical clowns are doing in the distribution areas is they pull out the kids from the line, so the kids can stay safe. They keep an eye contact with their own families in line, mothers and fathers, but they work with the clowns. And if God forbid something happens and there is an armed clash around the distributions, there's the whole method, how we prevent the kids from running into that fire in line, so they stay safe, although they worry for it. And the other thing that the medical clowns are doing with us is they're treating verbally rape victims. You know that in this world, this part of the world, and even Southeast Asia, rape is very sensitive. The girl will never marry, and the disgrace of the family, and whatever. And these girls that we're trying to treat and keep safe will never discuss our emotional trauma specialists via a translator. Translators are always from the local community, and they're afraid they're going to chit-chat, and the story will be revealed, and the whole family will go into a chaos. So we use medical clowns that were, trained, very well trained to deal with sex harassment and rapes, verbally, and that's why you need to use them. Israeli technologies. We never have the opportunity to share who we are. And as I mentioned, we're not busy doing PR for our country. We have a strong one, they can handle it themselves. But bringing sophisticated advanced technologies within disaster countries or areas, it's like leaving a footprint. What you can see here is a medical field surgery tent that sterilizes the internal space on a constant basis. So 2 of these were passed to Idlib, 2 of these were passed to Aleppo, and started to function. The problem is that we were so happy for this donation, we never checked it at home. And when that was inflated on the field, we saw it was red. And it's very visible. It was more of designed for disasters, but not for conflict. And knowing the regime, the Syrian regime, was targeting from the air on a constant basis medical facilities strategically to harm the emotional resilience of their civilians and opposition fighters, made that red color a big problem, because it was very easily seen. So we had to cover it instantly, but the problem is, when we covered it, the temperature inside raised up and the sterilization system stopped working. So what would be very easy back home? Plugging in, ventilator, or plugging in,
an air conditioning system, just made it impossible. You know, working on generators, digging the fuel inside if there's a bombing, so the medical teams will not be an additional exposure due to the fact it will explode on Earth. Everything is very, very complex. Although it sounds easy at the world we come from, we have to remember that in crisis area, it doesn't matter who we were. It doesn't matter. The fact we were Israelis working on Syrian land did not cause the complications. The complications were caused due to the circumstances of trying handing over direct humanitarian aid to the civilians who needed it on site. You can see Lisa, you saw her face before, she's Blair, and a Syrian doctor next to her, and you can see the flag behind. So what we have done, you probably heard about our government's work pulling out victims from Golan Heights, the joint border. But about this work you haven't heard. This all began in 2013, where our organization pulled out children and babies via Ben Gurion Airport and brought them of course, away from the public eye to the hospitals in Tel Aviv, performed all kinds of procedures they had needed to go through, and pushed them back home to Syria, to their families. Most of the children that were already able to talk did never know where they were. Some of them were sure they were in Bulgaria. So they will not go back home and start chit-chatting, and they say, hey, we got treated in Israel, and put the whole family in danger. Okay? Some others that were babies got their surgeries done and needed follow-up checks. So how do you perform follow-up checks for the ones who were operated in Israel and sent back to Syria? So what you see here is once a month we had this operation going on where all those medical files and children focused to the same so-called safe place and came to get the follow-up treatments by Israeli team members who knew them from home already. Here you can see, we all sit here and we see, oh, that's how a medical facility looks. So that is a shelter apartment functioning within Syria in Idlib in 2015, functioning as a surgery room. You can see the back, you can see here the anesthesia machine brought by us 6 months prior to that picture. There is a light, a standing light, like in surgery rooms, but I'll help you to drill into that picture. I'm sorry, the resolution is not so good, too much light here. But you can see what they work with. And you can know it from your, no sterilizing products, nothing exists. And still, people are operating and trying to do their best for their own people. Again, children that were brought and received heart surgeries, I urge you to visit the booth of Save a Child's Heart out there, a colleague, a fellow organization that does amazing work. All the hostile enemy countries we visit at, we try to establish contacts for them to be able to bring children with heart problems, perform those surgeries needed in Israel, and send them back home. So Save a Child's Heart brought over 5,000 kids from Gaza, from Pakistan, from Sudan, from Iraq, from Kurdistan lately, from Syria, of course. This is a Syrian child, you can see. We base the contacts for them to do eye surgeries. Eye surgeries from Eye from Zion is an organization that performs eye surgeries for people in remote areas that are not accessible, do not have the funding for eye surgeries. And you can see this structure. They just put the head in a sterilized environment and everything, all the microscopes and everything. And the personnel are in there already. One other project we led in Syria is, what you see here is Syrian doctors, orthopedics, and IT personnel that are getting 3 days training on how to produce limbs, prosthetic hands. We supply the materials and products, push them in on a constant basis for them, and they were designing. It's like science fiction. It really is one of the most emotional projects we ever done and saw, because usually we just see how it begins. We never see how it ends.
So the joy part is not our part. But in this case, a child is coming in and scanning the healthy hand, and then the amputated part, and then a window opens up, and she see all kinds of models and types of prosthetic hands. The one looks very little hand. This one is called superhero hand. And the kids get emotional treatment, and then they go for choosing their upper limbs. And that's what you can mostly see here.
You all heard about the white helmets. I have to tell you a story. In 2013, we moved working in Turkey via the Turkish border, alongside with our Syrian colleagues, and we understood that there's hazards that we were not planned for. Of course, search and rescue teams are always needed, and we started to train groups of 20 people, 20 civilians, 20 on the buffers of Turkey and Syria. So it was Israeli personnel that trained all of them and tried to do the best for them to be able, with their skills and capabilities in very, very, light equipment, to save people out of the rooms. The problem began a bit later when the regime started to drop barrels. The barrels problem was fires. They used to light very, very harsh fires, and when you add that to civil population, on cooking gas available in every building, you get a disaster done. And immediately we started to notice victims of burns and fires in the clinics and hospitals we worked at. We worked and supplied 70 field hospitals and clinics within Syria, from the northern part of Syria. And the doctor reported back. And what we had started to do is train them for firefighting as well. Not only search and rescue, but firefighting. And you can see them, everything they wear was purchased by Israeli flying aid, imported to Turkey, handed over to the Syrians within Syria. Even that truck was bought, used in Italy, moved to Greece, to Turkey, Aleppo. And it sounds easy, trust me, but it's not. And what you have to understand, that these amazing people at the end of the day fought against all risks, against all odds. They had to make the impossible for their own people. We lost a lot of friends. We lost friends that never had a chance even to get to know us as who we really are. And again, I'm mentioning this is the first exposure ever we do to that Syrian issue. These are search and rescue teams. Distribution points in Aleppo. So you can see we photoshopped the organization that worked with us to protect them. And you can see the two stripes of the Israeli flag and IFA in the middle, which stands for Israeli Flying Aid, but in that case it stands for International Flying Aid. So people do not take any risks. And they distribute it. Underneath you have the family, the list, the name and number of members of family and the date they received. And these packages, hundreds of thousands of those, were mobilized from Turkey to Syria and distributed in Afrin, Azaz, Aleppo, Idlib province, and more, by our team members and our Syrian colleagues. And those hundreds of thousands of families don't even know who's standing behind them. They were educated for so many years. Their previous president and this current president, if we can call him a president and not a murderer, he's the one that for many years taught them they had to be worried from us, Israelis and Jews. We were the devil, we were the cruel ones and dangerous ones. But at the same time, I'm waiting for the second we can release those pictures within Syria, so all the people will understand at the end of the day that we were the one protecting them and helping them to survive. Well, their own president, but promising them for many years to protect them from us, he's the one massacring their own kids. So this is ISIS prison. It's not a prison, it's I don't know even how to call it. And you can see in the back, these two little girls. It was taken from a helmet camera, that's why it's not such a good picture, but you can see the chaos, you can see the fear and the shock. That was a single operation we did to release Yazidi sex slaves, women and girls, from captivity of ISIL. That held in 2016, with 27 Yazidi girls were released. And we'll jump to 2016. We were begging our Prime Minister back home in Israel to open the Golan fence for us since 2012 until 2016. Any person who got close to the Prime Minister we had contact with, we passed the document. We met him twice, nothing helped. At the end of the day, in 2016, the fence was opened for a pilot in May 2016. For a very, very silent pilot, whom we had the honor to be approached as the first and only NGO that army in Israel fully trusted to remain silent. We managed the pilot with the idea for the army for 2.5 months, and an army took a decision that this fence will be opened. And in the Northern Brigade, they established a project with a commander specializing in that, called Good Neighborhood. And under this project, you can see this first picture, and you can read the Arabic. This first picture was taken and put online in order to harm this initiative, in order to prove there's Israeli products, food products, already within Syria, and try and stop this initiative by the Assad regime. You can see those medications and medical equipment pushed by Israeli flying aid, by our organization, with American donors, and supporting of Syria. Within southern Syria, you see baby warmers, and this is a project. I'll have to stop for a second. As you know, medical facilities were bombed from the air to harm both Brazilians, civil, of course, and military. What you see here is called Breka Hospital. Breka is a village not far from the Israeli border within Syria. And what happened throughout the years of the war in Syria, women stopped going give their baby or giving birth at hospitals because they were fearing being bombed from the air at that time. And they said, listen, let's go back in years. It's a natural, thing. Let's do it at home. But bear in mind, there's no midwives anymore for ages. Nobody knows how to perform those births at home safely. And we started to see babies suffering from lack of oxygen in their birth or other deformation. On the first, moment we had a chance to choose which medical facility we established from scratch, we decided to go for a maternity ward. And what you see here was built as a joint venture between the Israeli army within Syria. They brought water, sewage, electricity, generators for backup, and we have structured all the rest. And what you see here is 2 surgery rooms. The one dealt with rape victims very intimately, and the other one performs C-sections, so these women can give birth safe. The hospital was supposed to contain not more than 300 women a month. At the end of the day, after only 1 month of operation, it had over than 650 women that came to give birth, even from the master suburbs, because they heard about the quality of the treatment they got. And you can see the incubator, the intensive care, and that's what you can see in China, all those thousands of tents for 30,000 people that were rushing to the Israeli fence seeking shelter in July 2018 were provided with. You can see the joint collaboration between our members and the IDF, and I'll go for education. So exactly as we say to our counterparts in Syria and in all our world, we need to begin with education. We need to educate each other's next generation for compassion and peace. Signing peace agreement doesn't mean it's peace. We signed peace agreement with Jordan. For me, it's barely a ceasefire. I'm telling you the truth as a civilian. I don't feel safe going there. I don't feel safe to go to Egypt. I'm not having coffee there or traveling. It's unsafe. This is not peace. It might be a ceasefire, which is good for both governments and for everybody because we don't have an active struggle. But civil-wise, morally, it's not a peace. If we want peace, we educate for peace. What you see here is 220,000 children from all Israeli youth movements that are being pushed and encouraged by us, visibly and openly, in an operation which is called Human Warmth, to collect sleeping bags, warm clothing, and coats for Syrian children. Over than 70 tons of supplies moved for the first time ever to the Golan Heights and distributed within Syria on behalf of the Israeli youth movements. Without embarrassing the recipients, never ever. The kids sat at home and cut all the tickets having Hebrew on it, so they can use it within Syria and they will not be vulnerable. You can see another operation, a crowdfunding event, the biggest ever in Israel. For Syrian children, bear in mind the perspective in Israel that Syria is an active opponent, is an active, enemy. So children had to fundraise at schools with their parents. They did that, adults. All political aspects in Israel joined efforts. Settlers, left wing, right wing. 2 million shekels were donated within less than 2 weeks. Over than 15,000 Israelis donated. So for us, it was a first experience. Remember that even in Israel, we are not visible. Very rarely we go on the media. And when we go on the media, mostly is just to, to drag the attention to a different place while we're busy somewhere else. You can see that is moved for the first time ever with a flag, with the logo of our NGO, upon the request of the Syrian counterparts. They had requested, they said, we stop fighting, we stop apologizing for collaborating with you. We want not the European logo you carry, we want yours. You can see the snow and how does it happen on the field. And again, these pictures we show for the first time. This is the Hermon mountain. It's half of the mountain is within Syria, the other half is within Israel. Under the control of Hezbollah on the left, Lebanese side, regime side on the other. And the only access for 5 villages to get supplies, food and medical aid is Israel. But look at that, snow, mountains, and all kinds of militias and groups trying to prevent them from coming. And that's how they come. They come on donkeys and on horses, and that's how it's packed for them, so they can tie it up. Every animal can carry until 250 kilograms. We reduced it to 200 because it looks too difficult for us. And they just move in and out from the medical facilities. If you think we were just for people, you're mistaken. This is a nice story about a voucher that was shot in the wing and fell in the opposition area within Syria, in the southern part of the Golan Heights. And the group that had found them contacted us as an NGO because they were not working, I'm sorry. Sorry. And the group that was working was not working with our army, so they never had access. And they contacted us and said, hey, we have this voucher, one of these wings, do you want it? He moved 3 different militias, came to a medical facility we had access from and pulled out to Israel, recovered and operated, and after 6 months were released to nature again. And we broadcasted it to our counterparts in Syria, the ones who sent them to us as well. Again, these movements, you can see our Prime Minister saluting the youth and saying thank you for who you are. At the end of the day, even the Prime Minister's office acknowledged the fact that this campaign was super important. It was the first ever the Prime Minister spoke to the youth and openly and in front of the media took a stand against Assad. And you can see protests.
next to the Chinese embassy and Russian embassy within Israel by that same youth, calling them for voting, stop voting and setting their opposition against the condemnation of Assad at the Human Rights Council and Security Council. Currently we're working, we're focusing in Africa. So what you see here is shipments to Chad. For the first time ever, an Israeli group openly, a year and a half ago, deployed an open vision mission to Chad, whom we just established new diplomatic relations. You have Lake Chad, you have Boko Haram, you have all kinds of other groups working there, and very hostile to us. So what we did is, those missions at Lake Chad worked with medical teams and food distributions. But what you see here is a piece of history where the Chadian army is sending a full cargo plane that landed 4 months ago, in an Israeli army base, where we uploaded 14 tons of COVID-related supplies to help the Chadian people to cope with this terrible pandemic. I want to share with you, I'm not sure if it's going to come up, my Lebanon. Just a minute, I'm going to try and... So that was a campaign launched immediately after the last blast in Beirut. We understand we will never get help as an NGO from any international organization. We did not want to risk our Lebanese, any Lebanese civilians that, were needing our help. And we deployed airlifts of medications and sanitation kits that were moved to Beirut and distributed within Beirut, of course, via a different organization that would never risk the Lebanese recipients. And speaking about creating change, there's two things I'd like to share with you. So again, as I mentioned, some of the people we meet in the worst time in their lives are feeling such a gratitude that they want to do something. In the rare times they know, I can tell you about 2 times, and you can see here an activist, a Syrian activist who agreed to receive help with us. He was very brave. It was back in 2012, and since then we worked for 3 years together. And I had the honor to be invited to a president's 90th birthday, Shimon Peres. And he followed our organization very, very tightly throughout many, many years. And he said, can you please come and talk about what you do in Syria? I said, how can we talk about Syria? We're still active. How can we talk? And he said, I'll find a safe place. No cell phones, no access for communication of any kind. Just talk. And when we came back from the previous mission, I told that person, I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to be at my president's birthday speaking about Syria. Do you have any message to him? Listen to what he said.
Assalamu alaikum, Mr. President, and shalom, ladies and gentlemen. It was a day I couldn't imagine that would happen. The day I saw this wonderful Israeli lady with her wonderful smile telling me we are helping the Syrian people in their hour of need, and we want your help. I was stunned, me as a Syrian who just got out of Syria and witnessed the brutal crackdown of the government on a population that was fed up with the status quo and wanted change. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we started working with friends joining us from both sides. In this work, I saw hope for the future, a future with no dictatorship in Syria, where we were told that Israelis are inhumane and only care about killing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a long road and a bumpy one. People will lose their lives, and the forces of evil will try to hinder us at each step. But it is a battle for humanity, and it is worth dying for. God bless you, God, and God bless you all. Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity, and may God bless you and help you with the good deeds you are doing to achieve Mizrach Tikon Chadash. And please accept this flag as a sign of this hope.
The person is handing over to my hands this flag, and just before I step down the stage, I handed over the same identical flag to the president, and I've said, you know, honorable president, I think it's the first Syrian flag ever reaching Israel, not as a provocation, but as a true hope for a different future for both nations. And I will end my things with a different kind of change. You saw the line of donkeys and animals coming towards Israel to receive the help. They weren't friends to Israel. They weren't our friends. But we saw above and beyond any political issues. We saw children and women that were suffering. We saw women that lost their children due to the fact they could not breastfeed. And the babies were too little to eat anything else. They suffered loss and trauma, and they didn't have baby powder milk. We saw the urge of passing help and marrying any devil on the way to the victims. And I can tell you very clearly, I'll marry any devil needed in the future as well. I think the target is one, is life-saving missions. And the person you see here is belonging to a Nusra Front. Hates me, hates who I am, hates my identity and my country. But he is the commander of that militia on that precise area, having 5 villages fully isolated with women and children within those. And one day, he barely speaks English, but he's very well understood, believe me. He calls me on my Israeli cell phone, on WhatsApp. Usually that wasn't the contact he was using. And I saw that and I was very, very shocked, and I said, hey, what's going on? And he said, listen, we're in trouble. We're going to lose this war. I know it by now. I need your urgent help so the next convoy will be more than double because I'm going to lose access to your border. You know, I took a deep breath. I said, listen, I need to fundraise for it. And it's very difficult to fundraise for undercover missions because donors, they want the credit for it. I said, I need time. How urgent do you need it? He says, I need it within 4 days. I said, can you pass me the list of what you need for the medical facilities? He said, I will pass you the list. And you know, here we were, fully desperate, do not know where to reach the sources to buy these quantities he had really needed. The same night, we get a phone call from a child, 13-year-old Jewish boy from America, from Los Angeles, whispering, and I couldn't even hear. He says, are you Israeli Flying Aid? I said, yes, we are. He says, I'm a bar mitzvah boy, you know, I'm 13, I'm celebrating the ceremony between my childhood and my adult life, and I want to donate you all the money I got for this as presents for this big birthday we celebrate. And I was like, I was beaming, and I said, well, you know, how much do you want to donate? He said, wait, my father is on the line with us, and he will match my money. He was so emotional, I want to donate my money for the Syrian people. Via your group, he will match the money. And I had 60,000 US dollars at the same night. 60, just 60. But for them, it meant the whole world. In the morning, we moved the list, we purchased the supplies, and I called him and I said, hey, Imad, I have your things. When are you coming to the meeting point? He said, how come did you get this money so fast? And I said, you know, it's a little boy from the US who are thinking about you guys and what you face. And he said, put him on the line. Remember, okay? And Nusra friend, speaking with a Jewish boy in America, I said, you know, Imad, I think we need to reconsider. His dad might regret the donation and take the money back. I said, no. But I said, maybe you want to record on WhatsApp and send it to me. They're going to come to Israel, have a party, a big celebration for his birthday, and probably we will be on stage, and I will let them hear that. Listen to the recording. Pay attention. He's crying. The commander is crying. It's a very bad recording, but pay attention how emotional he gets when he speaks to a 13-year-old boy, Jewish boy, on the other side of the world in the US.
Dear me, as a Syrian and on behalf of my family and the children and the people of my town, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your outstanding donation on this special day of your Bar Mitzvah celebration. You are truly a model of hope to all children worldwide by deciding to donate all of your personal gifts to the Syrian children. I would also like to thank your parents who have taught you the importance of giving and raised you as a human and loving child. Now turning into young adult on this special day, it is because of people like you that I continue hoping for peace in our region and for the possibility of meeting face to face. I hope one day, perhaps through humanitarian efforts, the Syrian people will get to the Israeli people and begin building trust. Dear Meg, as our future human generation, thank you for your outgoing kindness. I wish you a best of luck and very happy Bar Mitzvah. Thank you.
He was killed a week before that party took place. When I went on stage and spoke about it, he wasn't living anymore. And all of a sudden, when I heard it again, it sounded just like his will for a change. The last thing I'm going to share with you is the complexities we face when we work with people while using undercover stories. So it goes both ways. We can say safer, it's true, but how about them? If something happens to us, to Israeli team members, if there's a clash, if somebody gets wounded, if our doctors, God forbid, while treating them under stress, will start speaking Hebrew and burn the cover story. We take full responsibility on what's going to happen to us. We know that, trust us on this one. But what's going to happen to our colleagues, to our Muslim colleagues? that did not choose openly to collaborate with the Israelis. They just believe the cover story. And this emotional debate, follows us for many, many years. And within that issue, within Syria, one day was just too much. There was a very, very difficult incident where some of our people got wounded, and it was a big mess. It was a chaos. We left the site, we went and got treated in a safe place and exited the country and chose to step forward for the first time with our identity in front of our Syrian colleagues and let them choose. Let them choose whether they want to collaborate with Israelis for the benefit of their own people and children, or they would like to stop. I have to tell you it was a very difficult moment, because how do you sit? I was there, I sent the volunteers back home. I couldn't go to my home because my eye was still, I didn't look so well, so I decided to relax and wait. But I was, sure that I wanted to create that change. When the volunteers reached home safely, I invited 2 politicians from that political Syrian group that was in Europe at the same time, and 2 fighters that used to open the gates for us and allow us access to their communities. And we sat in a hotel in a 3rd country. And how do you tell them, guys, I was lying to you for 3 years? That was a very difficult moment. The only thing I could do was taking my business card, carrying the real logo you see now, and placing it on the table. So the one commander just stood up like he was bitten by a snake. He was working with me for 3 years, and he started to scream. He said, now I understand. You're not even a friend. You're my enemy. And let me tell you one thing, it doesn't matter what you did for the children and women of Syria. I'm going to finish with Assad, I'm coming to you. You're coming next. And he switched into Arabic and started to talk and discuss and tell his own people to leave. They were so shocked, they just refused moving. And then he went back into English and he said to me, what happened to you now? Now that I know where you're coming from, you lost your tongue. You're afraid to speak. Why don't you answer? I said, well, sir, first of all, I think you're too emotional to listen. And the second thing is, I haven't noticed any question mark. And I said, since I see you planning to leave, let me tell you one thing. The first part of your phrase, removing Assad, looks appropriate for you guys. All you wanted was democracy. To grow up your children in freedom, in safety, prosperity, like we do next door. The second part of your sentence, removing Assad and coming towards us, well, that's a very bad idea. Because last time you tried to do so, we just kept with us the Golan Heights. In your situation now, we're going to go to Damascus. And what would you do then? Just increase the power we have over at the Israeli side for negotiations we both need to held one day. He left the meeting. Time has passed and I was invited to sit with a group, present my case, let them present theirs and make a vote whether they want to go for an open collaboration or not. And what you see here is the contract that was signed 6 months later. And what released my conscience was the phrase, on the ground we have worked together, based ties on trust and cooperation, and each side take full responsibility on the risks involved in such an undertaking. That was a place and moment where my conscience was released from the moral obligation, misleading those groups collaborating with our group in Syria. In the memory of those who lost their lives while nobody was there to protect at the Holocaust, we feel morally obliged to do what we do, to run around the world and to be the voice of those voiceless people, although the risks we face. And due to a strong army, we have the emotional and physical resilience to work outside of Israel and not only deal with our own internal problems. Shimon Peres, whom we spoke about, who followed that organization, Minister of Justice, Canadian Minister of Justice, a human rights activist that follows our missions. You can see President Clinton, Dalai Lama himself, and many others. Planting seeds of hope. Hopefully, I just want to say one word. For us, being hosted here is very emotional. It's more than symbolic, the fact, after 15 years of activity below the radar, we chose Dubai and the HAD conference to speak. Hopefully that's going to plant the roots for future activity and collaborations worldwide, and not necessarily in hostile and enemy countries to Israel, which is our focus right now. So thank you for listening, and I hope it was interesting for all of you. Thank you. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer.
I would like to add something. First, thank you for your presentation.
Microphone.
First, thank you for your presentation. I think you are doing what you have grown up in your Jewish people, and as citizens of Israel. And you try always to help the humanity, I know, not only in this region and all over the world. And what you have done, it's a symbol for people who like to live together, to try to cross the borders and to live for peace forever. My note is, I'm familiar with what happened in our region. After you have began to work, I will remember you that our leaders and the Israeli army opened a very wide field hospital. Thousands of people wounded, women, children, even from the tough enemies of the Israeli side came to these hospitals. They never asked who are coming, who can take the treatment. And they work hard, and they believe that this is the way to operate. And I think we decided on our side to close this hospital after we know that the shooting finished, the ISIS and other groups left the border, and more peaceful life in the other side, the Syrian side. I have this note because, people doesn't know, because we are not speaking about what exactly happens and what's difficult. Here we have the Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly, Sergio, is listening also. We have called several times in the tough days to save people, to save the dangerous places, to open the eyes of the world, hoping that this peace that you are talking in this plenary here in Dubai will be the wide road to all of the people of the region to have peace and life. We want to live and to cooperate, not the opposite. Thank you.
I'll just say thank you for that comment. I'll just mention one thing. The misery of the Syrian people is not over. Not even close to it. But since we lost access, border was sealed, the regime took over, we lost access to that border in the south. And maybe it's the right place to ask if somebody has, we do not care who's in between. We do not care who is on top of the civilians. We just want to have the same access to the same civilians who are still suffering on the other side. We do not care who is in power at the other side. It's an internal Syrian issue. We wish we could handle it. We cannot. We will not even have those inspirations. We just want to have access to the victims on the field via any third country, party, organization, or whatever solution we'll be happy to work with. Thank you very much.
Thank you.